Tachas Kiddushin Daf Samach Aleph continues the Gemara's discussion about Tanoim, conditions in a Kiddushin. We've just discussed that if a man gives a woman Kiddushin on the condition that he has a base core of land, he has to have the base core of land. The Gemara now discusses how you measure the base core specifically, and we'll talk about three cases. We'll talk about if he's makdish a base core, how do you measure it? If he sells a base core, how do you measure it? And if he does Kiddushin, how do you measure that? And we're going to want to know, is Kiddushin fit in with the halachos of Kiddusha, of hektish, or with the halachos of a sale? So as far as a hektish, we know that if you're makdish a base core of land, you have to measure out the base core. You don't count holes or large rocks. They don't go into the measurement amount if they are greater than 10 tefachim high or 10 tefachim deep in the ground. And they have another condition. They are filled with water if it's a hole, or it's extremely rocky and impossible to plant if it's a high thing. That is the halacha by hektish. However, for a sale, it only needs to have one thing to not be counted. It needs to be 10 tefachim high or 10 tefachim deep in the ground. It does not have to be filled with water. And the reason is because for hektish, we have a pasuk that specifically includes the area at the bottom of the pit or at the top of the hill. Now, the sides, the sloped part, that doesn't count for sure because that's not part of a field. You can count it as a field. However, the bottom counts as its own little mini field, and it is included in the cheshbon unless it's filled with water. The way that I know that it counts is because of Xeris HaKasav. The Torah has an extra word, sada, when it talks about zera, chomer, sa'irim, that is evaluated, that's a field where you plant the barley, where it is evaluated at 50 shekel, and has extra word, sada there. It doesn't have to say misteachu zasai. It could have just said achu zasai, and that's to include an extra. That is to include an area which is very small, such as at the bottom of a hole. That's for hektish. However, for a sale, a person doesn't want to buy separate areas. He doesn't want to invest money in something and then he has like separate areas, one field and then one bottom, the field at the top on the field level, and then at the bottom of the field, the bottom of the hole. He's not interested in that, and therefore that doesn't count. It's not included in the measure at all. Now the question is, where does Kiddushin fit in? If he promised her a certain amount, like a base core size, do you include the bottoms of the holes and the tops of the hills or not? So the Gemara says it's logical that it counts as hektish, and the reason is because she doesn't have to do the work to fetch it out of the bottom of the top. He's going to do the work and give her whatever fruits grow there, and therefore she shouldn't have a hakpad on that. Now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses whether or not a Tanai has to be in the format of those of Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain. This refers to the Tanai that was made when the families of Bnei Gad and Ruvain wanted to inherit land outside Eretz Yisrael in Ever HaYarden rather than in the Eretz Yisrael side of the Yarden. And Moshe Rabbeinu made a condition: if they go and fight, then they can inherit that land, and if not, then they cannot. Now, there is an opinion that, as we shall see, that this format has three factors. First of all, you said both the yes and the no. If they go, if yes, then they'll get. If no, then they won't get. So you have to have both of those. That's called Tanai Kafel. You have to have a double condition. You have to say the yes and the no. Also, it has to be the yes before the no. You have to say what they will get. Otherwise, if you first say what they won't get, then you can't add a Tanai to it afterwards. And it also has to be Tanai Kodem L'Maisa. That you have to say the if before the then. You can't say that you wouldn't be able to say they will get the land if, because once you say they will get the land, that's it, they got the land. It has to be if blank, then blank. Now, Reb Meir says you have to have all these three conditions. If you don't, it's an invalid Tanai. And he quotes the pasuk about Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain. Says V'yem Raleim im yavru Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain v'im lo yavru, then not. Now, Reb Chanina ben Gamliel argues on Tanai Kafel alone. He says you don't have to have the Tanai Kafel. You don't have to have both aspects of it. He agrees if you do have it, has to be yes before no, and it has to be Tanai before Maisa. But he says you don't have to have it, and the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu said both is because otherwise he would have had a mistake. He would have think that if they don't go to Eretz Yisrael to fight, they won't get any land. Not only won't they be given the land in every Yarden, but they will lose their land in Eretz Yisrael as well, because they didn't want it because they felt like they had too much cattle and livestock. And therefore, you have to specify that if they won't go, they'll still get the land in Eretz Yisrael. However, there is no necessity that a condition has to be Tanai Kafel. That's the Machlokes and the Mishnah. We now begin the Gemara. The Gemara asks, what is Rabbi Meir's response to Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel? His point seems to be very valid, that we had to say the Tanai Kafel, as we would have thought that they lose their Chelik in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir says, true, but there's an extra word. It didn't have to say v'neichzu b'seichechem be'eretz Canaan, and if they go, they will inherit within your midst in Eretz Canaan. I could have just said v'neichzu b'seichechem. The Eretz Canaan part is extra, and that's to show you that you have to do a Tanai kafel, a double Tanai. Now Reb Chanina responds to that, and he says no. If it would have only said that they will inherit in your midst, I would not have known that they get anything in Eretz Canaan. I would have thought that they inherit in your midst. In Ever Hayarden, they get an equal percentage that they otherwise would have gotten an equal share as everyone else. But their percentage in Eretz Yisrael, they would lose. They would not receive it in Eretz Yisrael, and they would not get an exchange for it in Ever Hayarden. To that, Rameir responds says, no, B'Seichechem implies everywhere, wherever you are, in Eretz Canaan, in Eretz Yisrael, that is all included in your midst. The Gemara now quotes a Brisa where Reb Chanina ben Gamliel expands on his point, and he says the mashal to what's happening here is if somebody is dividing up his property as an inheritance to three sons, and he says Reuven's going to get this chelik, Shimon is going to get this chelik, Levi will get this chelik if he gives 200 zuz, and that would seem to imply there that he won't get any chelik if he doesn't give 200 zuz, and therefore he has to continue and say, and if he doesn't give 200 zuz, then he'll get a fair share with everyone else. There, the second half of the tais was giving him a Yerusha altogether. Otherwise, I would have thought it's only if he gives it that he gets anything. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu had to specify that if Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven won't go fight, they'll still get a fair chelik in it. The Gemara asks, hold on a second, Reb Chanina's mashal doesn't parallel his opinion in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, he said that without the Tanai Kafel, Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven would lose everything. They wouldn't get Eretz Gilad, they wouldn't get Eretz Yarden, and they wouldn't get anything in Eretz Yisrael. Here in the mashal, if he wouldn't give the 200 zuz, he would lose his special chelik in that field, but he would get a part. He wouldn't get the whole field, but he would get a portion of that field along with the other brothers. Why is that different than the mashal? So because he said the mashal after he heard Rabbi Meir's answer to his drasha from V'neichazu be'eretz Canaan, that they said that he would get a fair portion of Eretz Gilad, but just a percentage. That's what V'neichazu b'seichechem means. But they wouldn't lose everything. They would lose the entire Eretz Canaan. They wouldn't get anything as a replacement for what they lost, but they would still get a percentage equal to their percentage in Klal Yisrael in Eretz Gilad. That's what happens in the mashal now, because it's after he learned that from Rabbi Meir. The Gemara now tries to bring some proofs on the subject. So we have when Hashem was speaking to the Kayin, he says, if you'll do good, you'll get schar, you get reward. If you won't do better, then there is sin waiting at the door. So why do you have to say both sides tonight kafel? Obviously, like Rabbi Meir, you have to say it tonight kafel. So the answer is no. If you wouldn't have the tonight kafel, I would think that if you do good, you get schar. If you don't good, you won't get schar. That you'll get an actual punishment that I don't see. So that's why you need the tonight kafel. Next ayah is from Avraham Avinu's shvua to Eliezer to bring a wife for Yitzchak from Haran, from his relatives. And there he says it kafel. He says that here, if you will not do my condition, then there's a lassi, then there's my shvua against you, and if you will, then you're free of it. Why do you have to say both sides? Versus you have to say both sides to show that if he went and they wouldn't give him, then he's free. You would have thought that he should bring against the will. He has to add either way. If she doesn't agree, even if the relatives agree, or if the relatives agree, but she doesn't agree, either way, don't force her, don't force them. You're free of the shvua. You don't have to bring them back. Next, when it says im b'chulkaisei telechu, it'll be good. Im b'chulkaisei temasu, it'll be bad. Why do I have to say both? Again, my answer says before. You would think im b'chulkaisei telechu good, im b'chulkaisei temasu nothing. It just won't be good. Kamashman that no, it'll actually be bad. Next, the Gemara brings a similar proof from Sefer Yeshaya, where it says im taivu u'shematem, it'll be good. Im tim anu merisem, if you will refuse and rebel, it'll be bad. Again, why do I have to say both of those? And Chaim Gamliel answers again. You would have thought im taivu, it'll be good. Im timanu, nothing. Kamashman, no, it'll actually be bad. The Gemara concludes this proof by discussing the words of the Sukkim there. It says cherev techelu. Gemara would say, what does it mean? You'll eat swords. So Rava says you'll eat things which are bad for the body, like swords, which refers to large salt, barley bread, squash, and onions. And he quotes a Gemara where we said that this type of bread, dry bread, in salt with onions, is bad for the body like swords.